Welcome back to the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast. I'm Chad Gordon. Today, we're talking about leadership in a time where uncertainty isn't the exception, it's the norm. Economic pressure, rapid change, talent challenges, and technology shifts are all colliding at once, and leaders are being asked to navigate it all together. Blanchard's 2026 HR and L&D trends research gives us a clear view into how organizations are responding and where leadership capability is either driving results or holding them back. I'm joined by three leaders who bring very different perspectives to this work. Dr. J. Campbell, Chief Product Officer here at Blanchard. Also from Blanchard, Ann Rollins, VP of Custom Solutions. And Britney Cole, Blanchard's Chief Innovation Officer. Together, we'll explore what's changing, what leaders are being asked to do differently, and what it will take to lead differently in 2026 and beyond. So, let's jump right in. Thank you all for joining. You know, when you first step back and you look at the landscape leaders are heading into in 2026, what do you feel like is most different compared to even a year or 2 years ago?
Mm. I'll certainly start. I sense and hear from our clients regularly this heightened sense of urgency. Things are moving faster than ever before, and the impact of not having equipped leaders in place when things are moving faster, when the spans of control are getting larger and larger at those frontline and mid-level leader levels. It certainly creates a sense of pressure that we've got to move and we've got to be doing the right things at the right time quickly.
I would
Thank you.
agree, Anne, but like that stacking pressure is leaders aren't dealing with one big challenge at a time. It's economic uncertainty, talent constraints, what's expected of making the best employee culture, and all the tech shifts certainly can be a whole other conversation, but it's all happening at the same time. So maybe a year or two ago, leaders could sequence change to some degree, and now it's competing, conflicting priorities all at once, and then trying to show up as a human while doing it. And I think that's new for a lot of organizations.
I'll add just that, looking through the research in depth, there was this strong theme of companies struggling more than normal, companies reflecting the economy. Something like 70% of organizations are struggling, and with like 40% struggling significantly. And that's creating a lot of pressure at the top, a lot of pressure in the middle, pressure at the bottom. So it's actually creating almost a sense of desperation and disillusionment at a new level. So I think that's a tricky landscape for leaders to be steering into.
So, Jay, we're going to stick with you. A question that I was thinking of coming out of this trends report: leadership capability continues to rise to the top. The biggest organizational challenge, it really truly is what's bubbling up. From a product and a research perspective, why do you think leadership has become such a clear business leader?
It's a little surprising sometimes to not see some shifting happening, but I think building leadership bench strength has been this evergreen topic for a lot of leaders and a lot of executives and HR and L&D people. And a lot of it has to do with this multiplier effect. If maybe you can't train 10 people, but you can train the one person that leads them. And hopefully that better leader can activate and lift up, the dozen people or so that they lead, even more and more every year, more and more people that they lead. So I think it has to do with that. It was the number one organizational challenge. It was the number one focus across HR L&D. It was even agreed to between those in a HR L&D and also those that are just in general management, that it is just never been more important to create strong leaders and a strong leadership bench.
Brittany, this one's for you. Organizations, they talk constantly about agility, they talk about change. From your innovation lens, are leaders truly evolving or just getting better at reacting faster?
Hmm. Yes, I would say many leaders are getting better at reacting faster, and we're putting the umbrella of agility around that. But I do see that true evolution still acts. And as Jay said, change and agility are high challenges for learning organizations, but leadership capability is still the biggest gap. So we're we're not doing the best job of rethinking how decisions are getting made or how employees actually build and retain and sustain skills or how organizations build a culture of trust in uncertainty. So I think we're doing a lot of throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. But then the moment we see some dip in some result, we pivot too fast versus maybe letting some of these changes matriculate longer and have real sustained change. So it makes it feel like we're doing something about it, but we're really not moving the needle.
We're going to shift a little bit towards one of the other topics within the trend survey around hiring, retention, and engagement. And I don't know about all of you, but from what I'm hearing from friends, it's tough out there. It's tough out there as an organization trying to find the right talent. It's tough out there if you are the right talent trying to find your organization. So, Ann, this question's for you. Hiring is still expected to be difficult next year. From your work with clients, what's the most common thing that you're seeing organizations are underestimating when trying to attract the right talent?
Mm, that's a really great question. And I'll tell you, in our world today, people are making decisions about organizations they want to work for and those they don't very quickly using social media. And so, if you're an organization that is known to grind people into dust, where leaders don't treat people well, where employees are not seen as a huge value to the organization, you're in trouble. So that's kind of the first thing. Second is the squeeze is on. So in your organizations, your leaders have to be able to do more with less. And because of the constraints, we're seeing so much what we call at Blanchard bud to boss, where we're promoting from the inside and faster than ever before. Um, and you take that and overlay that with the fact that every hire matters critically to the organization because it takes a long time to get someone in to assimilate them and get them upskilled. And when we think about the impact of ill-equipped leaders and what that creates, it builds a bigger backdoor so people leave. They can't they can't retain the employee base that they have. They don't necessarily know how to engage new hires and instill them to perform at a high level quickly. And so really focusing in on the people who are a heartbeat away from, the customer, that frontline employee, and having leaders that are ready to lead these people effectively, it just needs to be the highest priority in organizations because the span of control is so great and the impact is so significant. That's what I would think. I'd love to hear from others actually.
Yeah, Jay, what do you think? Burnout, limited growth opportunities, they continue to drive retention challenges. We're seeing it everywhere, seeing it in the trends report.
Yeah.
From your perspective, how are performance pressures inside organizations shaping engagement right now?
Oh, they're just crushing it. So let's put our like experience hat on here and think about early in our careers, and all of a sudden the growth hopes you have, maybe to take a class or move into a promotion or do some it's all drying up. There's no promotions, there's no raises this year. The benefits aren't getting any better. They're not keeping up. All of this is happening. Burnout. They're expecting you to do more with less people. Somebody to your right or your left might not be there anymore. It's really adding up. It's really adding up, and it's affecting retention. The limited career growth thing went to our number one concern, up from number four last year. And all these things are shifting, but burnout is a constant theme. And the other one that I think is really telling is who do you blame when all these things are happening, when your hopes and aspirations and your day to day is suffering? Well, number three this year is dissatisfaction with the quality of leadership. So that's what's happening in the workforce. They're frying out. They can't. The things that would cheer them up are drying up, and they're questioning whether the people in charge are really, are doing a good job. And all that just is like a soup for poor engagement.
I like that analogy. Just all soup. Brittany, question for you. We're seeing leadership communication and visibility strongly tied to morale.
Hmm.
In your opinion, what are the most effective leaders doing differently in how they show up for their people?
Yeah. If you think of whether, one of the first activities that we do in SL2 is best leader, worst leader. And it's deceptively simple because it just primes your mind of who do you want to show up? Like who do you want to be for your people? And generally, the best ones are predictable. So they're emotionally regulated. So they might be burnt out, but they're not showing up burnt out on the job. They're present and more so than ever they're personal. And so they don't just swoop in, right? They're not going to land when there's a crisis or just a quarterly update, but they communicate consistently. But here's the thing, they do so when they don't have all the answers. And there's nuance here because it's not, hey, I don't have the answers, and then blaming the people above them to say, well, I don't know, so who knows? They, right, the large they must have did something. And so leaders have this choice of do they become native with their people, or do they sit above the fray and say, I'm not 100% sure. I'll see if I can understand the why of that decision, but also acknowledge uncertainty because we make the best decisions we have with the information we have at the time. And if you convey that versus becoming more of a commingling, hey, it's miserable, yeah, it stinks, then trust is actually going to go up. Even though it might feel in that moment, you aligning with your teammate because they're your team because they're bummed or they're frustrated or they have to change again. And so those best leaders, they're also not just having more meetings for people to stew about it, but they're super intentional. They're keeping those one-on-ones and they're staying accessible. And I feel that that's like, if we think of like in our research and morale improves most when there's that sort of intersection of transparency, growth, and psychological safety on your team. And to be honest, the leader is the common denominator in all three.
And I'll let you bring this one home. Last question on this topic. So when transparency, when growth, psychological safety come together, we typically see, and the results show, engagement improve significantly. So my question for you, what's one practical move that leaders can make to create that environment without ultimately overwhelming their teams?
Hmm, that's such a great question. And We answer this question every day with our clients. You know, a lot of times clients will come and they want to build better leaders, and a lot of times we want to start at perhaps a higher place than naturally we should, which is trust. If your people don't trust you, and you go through all kinds of great leadership training on better communication and a more effective leadership framework, but they don't trust you, none of the rest of it really matters. And so imagine being able to get kind of the secret playbook on how do I look at how I show up as leader in the workplace, and what are the things that I naturally do that I'm unaware of that erode people's trust. It might be I don't show up on video and the rest of my team is, or I'm late to meetings, or I'm apologizing because I'm missing deadlines, or I'm not getting back to my people, and understanding the impact that that has over time. Imagine being able to make just a few shifts in your behavior that moves the needle on how your people see you. And so I think it starts with leader trust, because when they trust you, even if things aren't going the way we might all hope they're going, or if I have to deliver bad news, they know that they can trust me. They can believe what I'm going to tell them, and that I have their best interests at heart. I think that that is the biggest shift that they can make that affects everything else long term.
Let's shift to something that was in our first survey report. It's going to be in our last one, likely leadership competencies. So, Jay, lead off with you. Coaching and communication consistently rises to the top when we talk about leadership skills priorities. So, why do these still remain so difficult for leaders to execute well? Seems like so many leaders, this is a hit and miss.
Yeah, it's definitely a takeaway. Again, I like the continuity. I like that coaching, or we say coaching and mentoring people, representing a more supportive coaching style of leadership has been one for a long time, or up around there. And to me, what that says is it's not so much that it's remaining difficult. It's that, first of all, it's a skill that new leaders don't show up with. I think new leaders still start when they get a promotion, thinking that their job is to tell their people what to do. And so there's still this kind of continuous body of work we've been doing for over 40 years to try and shine a light on a more collaborative coaching style, more of a servant leadership style. So that's great to see the community is requesting that as well. And of course, you know, communication skills are something that everybody needs, and leaders need it even more. And again, they don't arrive on the job suddenly better at communicating. So they're not, leaders are no better than the people they lead in terms of communication skills typically. So it's just a really important area for them to work on. And I think it'll probably be up there, 10 years from now in the future as well.
Something else that is going to be up there in the future, Brittany, is AI. AI
Mm,
and emerging technology are now clearly part of the leadership conversation. What a difference just a couple years makes.
no
Are
kidding.
leaders leaning into this shift based upon our findings in this report, or are some quietly hoping someone else figures it out first?
I mean, surely it's a mix. Hesitation is still common, especially in certain industries. A couple weeks ago, I spoke at a tech talk for Stanford, and you think, oh, Stanford, early adopter, the heart of like Silicon Valley's imagination. And so imagine my surprise when what I encountered wasn't enthusiasm, but it was skepticism. Like, who sees the data? Can AI keep up? What if the model gets it wrong? And so we're in this wrestle with AI over objective facts, right or wrong frame. And then, but what we're missing though is the leaders who model curiosity, especially the principles of leadership. AI is a super tool because you don't have to be an expert. It doesn't even have to be necessarily factually right, but because what we deal with is like we're in the business of humans and conversations, it's about nuance and emotional intelligence and interpretation. And so if the best leaders who are using AI to their advantage, they're not asking, is this output 100% factually correct? But what they're asking is this helping me clarify what I think, challenge my thinking or my own assumptions? And then I'm taking those experiments and I'm telling my people about them. And so then you start to stack use cases and normalize learning in real time because in a lot of ways, the clients we work with aren't always making the AI decisions in their organizations. They're using the personal, ideally the paid version of ChatGPT on their phone. And a lot of organizations at best have Copilot to help them rewrite some emails or do some basic research. And so there is a disconnect between what we have at our fingertips as consumers versus what we have at our fingertips within the companies we work for. And so sometimes we are just waiting, like, what does our organization tell us that we can and can't do? But if we go into it where we don't focus on using AI perfectly, but using it in such a way to help drive a conversation and surface our blind spots and maybe role play a difficult conversation, it's going to be something that's going to be far more effective in embedding in the day-to-day conversation as opposed to just waiting for it to get facts wrong, which it'll do all the time, like it does with my fantasy football scores and stats.
Jay, you've spent a lot of time examining how corporate performance struggles, how they affect leadership behavior. A lot of time, a lot of research has gone into that. What patterns are you seeing play out there most often?
Oh, um, so leadership can mean two different things to a lot of people. So some people think of executive leaders, and some people think of people managers. And I would say at the top, um, what the trend I think I'm seeing is some like desperation to change, to pivot. We need to move, we need to shift, we need to adapt faster, and with a potential of not really understanding the pace and appetite within their organizations to actually pull that stuff off. And that can be a very disconcerting story when coming down onto the middle manager, the people manager, trying to sort that all out. There's a kind of a magical thing that happens with each level of management where they have to listen well to what's going on above them, the politics, the initiatives, the strategies, and then all the nonverbal stuff. And they have to interpret that and process that into a set of messages and action items and marching orders for below, and oftentimes provide like an insulation function. And so there's a lot of interpretation that happens. And right now, there's a there when the messages from above are a little more fragmented and a little more desperate, it adds pressure. So the middle manager, people manager layer, they're feeling more and more pressure. They have more and more direct reports as that level thins out. And as Ann mentioned, there's a lot of need for trust at that level, because they're doing different things differently with more people. So there's just a lot of stress, and like the whole leadership pyramid is vibrating at a higher rate right now. So what they need is clarity and optimism. That's what we need. What we need from the top leaders and flowing down through the middle is we want them considering more options. That opens up the mind to agility and adaptation, innovation, pivoting. But we want them to do less, actually choose less, so that the fragmented, fractured teams that are having anxiety fits can kind of get aligned around a smaller number of key initiatives. And when all their competitors are spreading themselves too thin, just by focusing on less, it can really help you be more successful and help you stand out.
And as organizations are facing more pressure to do more with less, and let's be honest, we've heard do more with less for a long time. This is not a 2025, 2026 thing. But as they face more pressure to do that, how are expectations for leaders changing at the front line and the mid-level?
Hmm. A couple of things. Do more with less. I do think that actually meant something a little different. Just a couple of years ago, we weren't we weren't necessarily seeing spans of control at the front line where a frontline leader has 20 direct reports or 30 direct reports. That is kind of something newish that's hit the radar in the last 18 months, and it's a real challenge globally, where these folks are being promoted earlier in their lives than ever before and earlier in their tenure in organizations than ever before. And I think that there's a couple of things here. First, that, the mid-level leaders, there are fewer of them. They have more reports who are leaders of large teams. So when you look at that pyramid that Jay was saying, it's vibrating, it's buzzing, it truly is. It's so important for these mid-level leaders to be able to translate strategic leadership into operational goals. And what does that look like for the people who are doing the work so that the leaders of these frontline employees are very, very clear. And so being able to do that well, the impact when it's not done well is massive. And so I would say at that mid-level, really focusing in on getting them to be able to see the strategic goals and be able to very clearly articulate that to the leaders of the workforce doing the work. And then when we get into frontline leaders, where the rubber hits the road, the goal setting acuity and making sure that they are able to set very clear goals for their people so their people understand what this objective, this goal looks like for me in my role in this organization. It doesn't happen in a single conversation, doesn't happen in a quarterly conversations. These are everyday conversations because things are moving fast. Things are moving, tweaking, modulating over time. And so the understanding that these conversations are regular so that your people can move almost like I think about it on my team, like a V of geese. And so they know the things that we need to be able to do so they can do it competently, confidently, even if perhaps, we haven't had a conversation with them and they're seeing things happening over a course of days or a week, or perhaps a little longer. But that's what I would say is translating strategic to operational leadership at that mid-level, and then making sure that those frontline leaders are very, very well equipped to communicate the goals and what those look like.
Brittany, looking ahead, which
Mhm.
leadership capability do you believe will most clearly separate effective leaders from those that are overwhelmed?
It's really similar to what I said before, but it's that ability to create clarity and focus amid ambiguity. So it's not having all the answers, especially when you begin having people on your team that you don't know their job. I have several team members who work for me, but I would not be able to do their job tasks. But what it does mean is actually helping people focus and prioritize and understand what matters now. What do I need to focus on now? Because I can do everything, I just can't do it all at once. And so the best leaders are the ones who can simplify, but also at the same time, not minimizing reality. And that's going to protect people's performance and their energy. Because we've all worked with overwhelmed, distracted leaders. That just amplifies noise. It creates more chaos. It creates more drain in meetings. And the best leaders do less is more. They reduce it. And so while we do try to do more with less, and we have probably larger spans of control, so we get less time with our people, the best leaders are going to be really succinct in what the focus area should be for each of those individuals and help them not worry about all the other stuff that's going on around them the best they can.
All right, let's shift gears to what we're finding in the trends report around learning, investment, and design. Jay, the first one's for you. A lot of uncertainty, and despite that uncertainty, organizations are continuing to invest in leadership development. What's driving that commitment, in your opinion, and what do the results show?
You talked a little bit about this about this earlier. Yeah, I mean the leadership development has been a continuous high level priority across executive teams and HR and L&D teams. And it is also one of those growth opportunities that individual contributors and emerging leaders want. They want to go through leadership development to increase their sphere of influence. There's all this research, tons and tons of research that say that the manager is the single most important determinant of motivation, engagement, work passion. That's a Blanchard phrase. Well-being. Um, it's also one of the greatest determinants of quitting or people leaving an organization. And I'm staring at my bookshelf, and there's a book there from Gallup called "It's the Manager." So if you want to hear some of these stats, take a look at "It's the Manager" by Gallup. It's the manager, it's the leader. Always important because of that multiplier effect. We describe this in something, a model we have called the leadership profit chain, but executives don't actually have any direct control over their organizations. They can't do the work. They can only point the way, and then the managers have to convert that and make it actually happen through the workforce. So the manager is that critical step in the process.
And there's nearly an even split between organizations that want to build solutions internally versus buying externally. From your perspective, what's pushing leaders towards a more customized solution?
Hmm. It's kind of the age old natural tension in in leading L&D teams, right? I want to keep my costs down, so I want to have my people build, or I need to deploy quickly, and so I'm going to need some support. What we see when we have clients coming to us looking for these customized solutions, and I've talked about it, is this urgency, and they've got to get it right. There's typically a need for speed to deploy. And if you've got a team of instructional designers who aren't leadership experts, you're going to reduce your speed to deploy. And you're also going to have to hope that they are able to do their research and that they get it right. And the time that it takes them to build that solution, we know the shelf lives of these solutions are much shorter than historically they've ever been. So for us, clients are coming to us for that speed, knowing that the content is right, that we can prove that it will work. The other thing is being able to lace in the red threads and connect our content to the things that matter most to our clients. We talk about at Blanchard our 5 drivers of learning impact. And first one is executive sponsorship. The second one is integration with what matters in the organization. So values, strategic imperatives, goals. And so having content that works, that's deeply integrated and connected, is driving that request for customized solutions, because having more content, you can add more content, and the organizations have been doing it, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It's content that is relevant and contextualized to what the business needs, that helps to accelerate performance. So that's definitely kind of meeting in the middle in what we're seeing.
Brittany, customization, highly valued, but not always well executed. I think we can all agree to that.
Yep.
What actually makes learning feel relevant and meaningful to today's leaders?
Yeah, it's from application. How does this impact my job and how I do it, how I show up at work? Not just personalization of look, feel, colors, brands. We hear from clients oftentimes, especially with our content, is, well, that program doesn't look, sound, or feel like us. That's an office and we work in retail. Or that like, what about for law firms? Or that office doesn't look like ours. And what we see is when it comes to when you build something that's so uber specific to the organization that you're working for, and Ann and I both worked in organizations where we built custom training for organizations, is we saw the opposite, where instead of focusing on the skills that you want people to build and giving them that opportunity to practice and apply, they're picking apart the scenario. Well, that's not exactly how it happens at work. That's close, but not exactly right. And you're getting almost so wrapped up in the context versus the content and how that content translates to the behaviors and outcomes you want to achieve. So when you think about what makes it meaningful, is leaders want learning tied directly to the decisions they're making this week. So real scenarios and real consequences. And then that's the magic of the role of the facilitator, or the role of a coach who can take the framework and even take the out of context situation and then say, okay, this is how it felt. Imagine how this feels within your organization. Because when you help leaders practice thinking and then making those connections outside of just the content or how it looks, and they can see beyond that, then you're going to have engagements, and you're actually going to have sustainment beyond the learning event, because the learning actually mirrors the complexity of their actual work.
All right, let's shift to the people that are on the front lines, those people that we're developing, the people not only who are developing, but how they're developing. So I'll bring Ann back in here. When you think about frontline and mid-level leaders, they typically are top development priorities. Yet the quality of support that we're finding in our research often lags. Where do organizations miss the mark most often with these groups?
Mm-hmm. Brittany said a word that I just wrote down and underlined. The word is sustainment. And that happens in a number of ways. So oftentimes, the focus is we need to get all of these leaders through XYZ training. And it's almost like running a car through a car wash and thinking the car is going to stay clean while it's out there on the road. A one and done approach doesn't work. And so thinking about how we do things, and I mentioned the 5 drivers of learning impact when I spoke last, really making sure that, that first driver I mentioned, executive sponsorship, it's making sure people understand how things fit in, and that we're giving them an experience, that this isn't just a quote training initiative. This is a way that we are working. It is deeply connected to how we are going to move forward as an organization. Part of this, I talked about integration earlier. And when we think about what we hear from our clients, so often it is, my leaders can't walk the talk. And so I can see the vision and how I can apply this framework to be a better leader for my people, but what about me? And so those are kind of the 2 big things I would think about, is making sure that leaders above those who are going through these huge investments in your people that have so much promise and potential, making sure that they're getting the support from their leaders, and ensuring that they've got opportunities to apply and sustain over time. The one and done approach is not going to garner the same results as something that's more well thought through over time.
Brittany, learning design and learning delivery rather has really settled into a mix of in-person, virtual, self-paced options. What are leaders still misunderstanding about how people learn and how behavior change happens?
Yeah. Um, I'd say the biggest disconnect is equating exposure to change. So very similar to what Ann just said. Like, you sit inside a classroom or a virtual classroom, or you take an e-learning course and thinking that's enough. In addition to, as you start to solve for personal effectiveness skills across all levels of your organization, so emerging leader development, because we all know that leadership development is sometimes allocated to the top rungs of an organization, is that a digital library of stuff is going to motivate people. And I don't know about you, but I've never said, wow, look at that investment into me when I have an e-learning library that I can pick from. It's interesting, it's helpful when I need it, that's performance support, but it's not seen as that investment in me. And as Ann mentioned, it's like learning can happen in a formal training setting, but really the true sustainment, that the true change of behavior happens in those moments of friction after the event, when people try something and maybe they struggle and they have time to reflect and they try again. And oftentimes we see most learners probably just apply new skills only to a moderate extent, not because the content's bad, but because we're missing that reinforcement. We're missing the accountability, and we're actually missing the space for people to quietly reflect and apply learning on the job, and using terms instead like learning the flow of work, of just putting more stuff onto people, hoping it gets done throughout the work week. And so if we start to rethink behavior change as more of a system, not an event, we'll get a little bit closer between the learning moment and the actual behavior change moment.
Jay, this one was really interesting to me, among many other things in the report. But you think about micro learning, sounds appealing, but results are mixed.
Yeah.
What determines whether bite-sized learning actually drives impact?
I mean, I like Brittany's, distinction of systems thinking, behavior change as a system. But I would say that is true. We did ask about that, and only about 40% of respondents thought their bite-sized e-learning was quote effective. Um, what determines whether it drives impact? The first one is that it's used, right? And there's a whole like phenomenon around L&D subscribing to some sort of set of e-learning, and then you're later looking to see if it's being used at all, and typically it's disappointing. There's another one around like the content being relevant and powerful, and I think the related to being used is it in the work path? So is it somehow connected to what they're doing? They have to go out of their way. If it's any more than just opening up a Google search bar window or a ChatGPT window and launching a question, then it's probably too far out of their way. Um, they need a reason to use it, which kind of gets back to that behavior change system that Brittany mentioned. So one of the interesting things from some prior research that we did, we asked L&D departments about personalization, and do you want learning personalization? Do you need it? Do you feel like it's inevitable? And there was just a lot of positive, optimistic, like bullish comments about basically you could say, how could personalized learning not be the reality 5 or 10 years from now? So everybody felt like it was inevitable. And when we asked about, well, are you doing any of it now? We got sort of weak answers around sort of, and what the answer was, we make, like a self-service e-learning library available to our people, parenthetically, and probably nobody's using it. So I think, there's a hope now that if you give learners access to a buffet of e-learning, that they'll use it. And and people probably don't really believe it, but there's optimism and they're busy. So there's a lot of those kind of purchases that are happening right now. But to get back to what Brittany said, I like the idea of having it be part of a system, not an event, so that it has a role to play in some bigger experience. I also like the idea of it being woven into their work experiences through AI in the future.
We're going to finish on one question because we're just about out of time. We're going to do a little bit of round robin, and I randomly drew names ahead of time. So, Ann, you're up first, just so you know. And this is the last question I have around just impact. And if, in your opinion, organizations could focus on just one leadership behavior in 2026 that would meaningfully improve engagement, retention, and performance, what should it be and why?
Mhm. I said it earlier, and I do believe it's trust. We know how important the relationship is between employees and their leaders. And with all of the constraints that we're facing, if you've got an opportunity to improve the perception of your trustworthiness with your people, everything else that you learn to do or try or practice or put into place comes more easily. And we all have opportunities to do a better job there, all of us.
Brittany, you're up next.
Yeah. I mean, trust drives everything. And my response is intentional two-way communication. It's those leaders who listen, they ask questions, they respond with clarity because people don't want perfect. They want to feel heard. They want to feel there's an anchor, and that's going to build trust. And I 100% agree with Ann because if we can create leaders who can have better conversations, that's the multiplier behavior that makes every other leadership skill work.
Jay, bring us home.
Love those. Love those. I also love the focus and clarity that points that were made during the day, but I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use as mine something I think that'll supplement what everybody else is saying. And it's a behavior of experimentation. So I think that if people embrace this idea of 2026 is going to be a year of experimentation, then what it does is it opens the door for some successes and some failures and some agility, and it kind of shifts people's mindsets to having some fun with change, as opposed to just kind of dreading it and being overwhelmed by it.
Wonderful. Ann, Brittany, Jay, thank you so much for giving an hour of your time to pour over the trends reports. So many great nuggets in there. We only scratched the surface as far as I'm concerned. So we'll make sure in the show notes and also on our website, Blanchard.com, you'll be able to get a full report. But for each of you, thank you so much for taking some time today to be on the Blanchard Leader Chat podcast.
Thanks, Chad. It's been great.
Thanks. Lovely. Great opportunity.
I want to thank Jay, Ann, and Brittany for a powerful conversation today. One thing is clear. Leadership is no longer optional or theoretical. The way leaders communicate, coach, adapt, and connect directly shapes engagement, attention, and organizational performance. As we look ahead, the organizations that thrive will be the ones that invest in developing leaders who can lead through uncertainty with clarity, empathy, and purpose. If you'd like to dive deeper into these insights, you can explore Blanchard's 2026 HR and L&D trends research, and that can be found on our website, Blanchard.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep leading with intention.